I'm going to do an experiment today, and I'm going to try controlling my slides with my phone. I've reached the year 2009, and I'm going to see what it's like. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Perl 522. 522 is our newest release. It's great. And the way that our development cycle works, if you're not paying attention, is like this. Every year, we've got a new stable release of Perl 5. And every new release is better than the previous one. For some value of better. Okay. They can hear me all the way in the internet now. Every month we've got a new development release, and every development one is different. Right now we're making different releases. We're doing development, but this is what we've just released to the stable branch. So I'm going to talk about what's new and that new thing you can install. It's a stable branch of Perl and shouldn't break too much. The first thing I want to talk about is code we ripped out. So we always rip out stuff from Perl. We got to get rid of that old crazy stuff that's left over there from who knows when so that we have room for the new crazy stuff. I can't use my phone. That's garbage. Okay. So one thing we've gotten rid of is the sigil-less style. I understand they're introducing this to Perl 6 because it's the circle of life. Everyone should know this code. This is really basic Perl 5 code. You've got an array. We're going to push onto it. You've got keys on a hash. This is all really simple stuff. Did you know you can write this? And that means the @ array. Or you could write this. This is totally valid Perl 5.20. 522, it is gone. I'm sure that you could fork Perl if you want and restore this behavior if it's vital to your operations. Also, pretend references. These are fun, so you should see this code too. This is pretty standard Perl. You've got a hash and you're pulling something out of it or you're putting something into it. So instead of having your little percent, we have variable sigils. So we switch to our $sign. Did you know you can write this? You can treat the hash itself like, no you can't. It's gone, goodbye, I'm very sorry. Now this one is a feature that it's not worthless. Anybody know what happens if you use question marks as your regex delimiter? Of course Tom knows. What happens is it only matches the very first time until you reset your program's mystical global state. It's actually a useful feature like once a year, maybe once every other year. But it's not worth stealing those question marks, so you can't do that anymore. The feature is still there. You just need the M, okay? It's one keystroke, people. Definedness on collections. This thing. Do you know what these mean? No, you don't. I do. They mean your program will die. Okay, this guy. So this is just another backwhack that you can put in your interpolative strings. And it's really useful. It gets you the control character that you're going to name. So what is the first one? It's control X. Anybody know the name of control X? Cancel. Very good, yes. Cancel. Now how about control @? This one's a little easier. That's the null. How about control space? Nobody, really? Come on. You don't use this every day? That's the grave accent. Now so we control X and we got cancel. What if we control X? What's control cancel? It's just X, we're flipping the X or bit. But what if we say, what's control inverted question mark? I didn't know. So I did what you do in these cases, and you run the debugger, and you say, hey, tell me what I get if I get control question mark. And it said this. And I said, okay, well this is a debugger, it's a terminal problem or something, I'm not getting the key in correctly, so I wrote this. I said, I want to make a string that's got a double quote and then a \C, and then the inverted question mark, okay, and then the end quote, and I'm going to eval it. And I get the result, and what's the result, anybody? It's a normal question mark. Actually, it's because I got 255 and my terminal is weird. So this is this deep mystery, and when I see mysterious, beautiful behaviors, I like to kill them, and that is what we have done. Your control character has to be a printable ASCII character. We like getting rid of these confusions. Here's another great one. $H. So this is where we stick what bits of strict and what bits of warnings are on. That's still here, but what you might not know is this variable has another name by which you can access it, and it is this. Now this is a problem with Keynote. It's a little confused because what I've actually typed is a $sign and then control H, right? Because #H means Control H. And what's Control H? Backspace, right. So this came up when somebody realized that if you had Control Hat K, that was the same thing as a vertical tab. And so now you're going to have a variable name that's vertical white space, and we said no. In Perl, even in Perl, there are limits. You used to be able to say use universal. It's kind of pointless, but you could say it. And if you were a horrible, horrible person, you could import ISA. No, you're done. We got rid of some old modules. Module build, still on the CPAN, but no longer shipped in the core. And a moment of silence, please, for CGI.pm. That's not silence. CGI.pm, you served us well. You will, okay. We've also tried to make some changes to the Perl 5 Porters community. We've instituted a standard of conduct. I'm not going to say a lot about it now. The standard of conduct that we have on Perl 5 Porters is very simple. It's be civil or please go away. Time will tell how effective this is. I feel it's been good, but we just don't want people yelling at each other. You can argue, just lay off. Okay, but that's stuff we were getting rid of. What are we adding to Perl? Because that's what we're here. We want more Perl. Okay, file handles. File handles are great. You need them, otherwise your program just gets warm, your computer warm. Here's a very simple program. We read stuff and we print if it's awesome. So what are we reading there? There's no file handle. We're reading the magic thingy. So if we send some input into the program.in, or standard in, if you prefer, it's going to read those lines. But if we run the program with file names, it's going to read each file in turn, and that's great. It's equivalent to this. As long as you've still got an argument to read, this is if we've got file names, as long as you've still got an argument to read, open it, and then read lines from it. Right? It's totally simple, makes total sense. The only problem is this. What's the problem with this guy? To_arg open. To_argument open means that if you do this, it opens a pipe from RMRFV, and you are sad. So that can be useful, right? So we're not killing that. This is not the code we're getting rid of, because this can be a feature. But we don't want it to be a feature you have to use. But we've added the double diamond operator. Double diamond is exactly like diamond, but when it opens a file, it effectively uses 3arg open. There's no magic on the file name. It's great. Okay, this guy, another semi-magical form of open. It's still 3 arguments. This is for opening a pipe, but what you see we've done is the program is at the end and then the arguments. Now this is not new. This has been there for a long time, unless you're on Windows. Now this works on Windows. Fantastic. Okay, implicit closing of file handles. This, for me, was a big win. I'm super happy. So this is nothing special. We're going to open a file handle and print stuff to it. And everyone will tell you, you need to use my $fh or my something for your file handles. And there's a couple of reasons, and one of the big reasons is that if you do this and you put your code in a block, then at the end of the block, the file handle is implicitly closed and it goes away and you don't have to account for it. And isn't that great? Well, it's kind of great. I mean, you're not going to leak file descriptors, but what's going to happen is that they close the file, but the disk was full and it can't flush the buffers, so close fails silently, and you don't realize you just lost all your data. But at least you didn't lose your file descriptors. You didn't run out of those. So what happens now is you still get the implicit close, and it can still fail, but you will get a warning. It's going to say, hey, I was just closing this file handle for you, and it didn't work. And you can fatalize that warning and say, if you get any IO warnings from this block, they're fatal. Now, I'd like to make this finer grained, possibly have auto-die turn this on, but this is like a big, big improvement on all these programs that are losing data once in a while and you never realize it. Okay, enough for file handles. Let's talk about regex. Regex are great. But first, establish some boundaries. And what I mean are word boundaries. So \b. \b is a funny one because it means different things in different places. But in our regex, we're going to talk about it meaning word boundaries. It's a very often misunderstood thing because people think that a word boundary would be a boundary between words. No. So we're going to take this sentence and we're going to split it, well, this line, and we're going to split it on word boundary, \b. Here's what we get. It's not so bad, but why are we splitting up don't into don, apostrophe, and t? And why are we splitting up its? And it's a little weird. Now, this is sort of a naive implementation of splitting up words, and Unicode, as is often the case, has given us a different naive way of splitting up words, which happens to be superior in most cases, and you get it now like this. What kind of boundary? A word boundary. And if you split it now, you get this. Yeah, it's pretty good. Now this slide is actually a lie. I just tricked you into applauding. Because what you actually get is this. You get some, like these spaces are getting split up. But you know what? That's okay. Because you're getting some extra spaces, but all your words are still words. There's another kind of boundary you can get, a sentence boundary, which is pretty cool, which is going to split like this. Now, you're very clever not to applaud, because I am tricking you again. This does not actually work, and we haven't gotten quite to the bottom of whether it should or not. What you have to write is this. Okay, but you can get this behavior other ways, and the code is there to get you access to the Unicode sentence boundary algorithm, which it really is a start. There's another guy, the grapheme cluster boundary. So let's split this sentence on grapheme cluster boundaries. Are you ready? Okay. Why would I use this? Well, this is not stepping in for word boundaries. This is stepping in for something else. This is when you weren't going to split on words. You were going to split into characters. Now here, this is a terrible explanation, but what if we were splitting something like this? I hope you all are fans of this great American rock band. Thank you. Now, if we split this into characters naively with the empty pattern, we might be very happy and get this, but we might split up the band and get that, depending on the normalization form of the string. Well, if you use grapheme cluster boundaries, you'll always get this. Grapheme cluster boundaries are the inverse of the \big X thing, right? Match the whole cluster, split whole clusters. Okay, but now we've started to sink into sort of bizarre little Unicode stuff that I think you should all love, and I know you don't. So we'll move on and talk about captures. Yep. Yeah. Oh yes, thank you, Nick. Nick's happy. Okay, so here we got a regex. I'm sure you've all seen this one before, and if you haven't, it's trivial. This is matching a version number. It's kind of a mess, just like versions. But we can clean this up a bit by adding some white space. So we're going to say we want a V, and then some digits, and then maybe a decimal point and some more digits, and maybe some underscore and some more. And that little X, that's the thing that lets us clean this all up. We're saying we can have some white space and it won't matter. And having done this, we might make a realization. We might realize it's still pretty ugly. And part of what's bad about this is those question mark colons. They're there so that we're not capturing everything, because we don't need everything. Well, why do we have to say every single time we're grouping that we don't want to capture? Let's not do that. Let's just say no captures, /n at the end. Yeah, it's great. But what we then find is we look at this and first of all, it's even better because we look at this and we think, hey, you know what? Now that I've done this, I didn't even need those first parens or a video feed. I didn't need those first parens, and you can drop them. But what if they weren't? What if you did need those first parens? And in fact, what if not only you needed them, you needed to capture? So you had some captures and some not captures, and you only want to capture explicitly. Well, there's an elegant and beautiful way to do this, which is like that. Wonderful, it's just what you do. No, it's terrible. There's a way to bypass this without using the awful question mark minus flags colon system, and it's this, to use named captures. Even in non-capturing mode, named captures will capture, because why else would you have put one there? And then we can get them out of the bottom from %+. But of course, I would never write this thing at the bottom, because what's the problem at the bottom? I've written the same word twice. That's no good. I would write this instead. So a brief digression back into the days of long gone and almost forgotten Perl 520. No, I don't need an @. Pair slicing. So you all know we can do this. We've got an array, and we want to slice out a couple values from it. So instead of doing a subscript where we've given it a $sigil and a couple keys, or in one key, we give it an @ sigil and multiple keys, and we get a list of multiple values. And you can do that on a hash. You get multiple values from it. This is not new. This is Perl 5.0. What we added last year was the ability to use a percent sigil and get a list of pairs out. So you get all the keys and the values. Yeah, fantastic. It's so good. And not only can you do that, you can do that on an array and get indexes. So when you find code like this, possibly like in the example code of any ORM ever written, you're going to see you're repeating yourself. And I don't like to repeat myself because then I introduce typographical errors like that. So instead of saying artist, artist, title, title, tracks, tracks, I can go and do this, right? Give me this subset of keys. But I've only done the beginning. And the reason is that here I'm getting stuff out of a hash ref, and I'm getting a slice out of an already dereferenced reference is the worst problem in the world. So you've got this thing, right? Here's our assignment. We've got a hash ref, and it contains a key to another hash ref. And we want to get a slice out of that. So how do we do it? We start like this, right? Can I just give it 2 keys? Nope, we just get a single undef from that. All right, good enough. How about this? I'm going to put in some circumfix and maybe an @ sign, and I'll throw in an extra arrow because arrows work. Arrows make things go. What do we get? We get not an array ref error. Okay, fine. It was you got me. How about this one? We get an empty list. Okay, and finally, there's the answer. It only took 4 tries. That's one of Perl's many mottos. It only took 4 tries. So how do we fix this problem? It's certainly not by repeating myself. Instead, it's this, right? We're going to take that whole referencey thing and stick it on the end, which gets us to one more thing I want to talk about from last year, because it's so good, and it should make you all upgrade today. Postfix dereferencing. So anytime you have horrible code like this, I apologize, this red is a little bit dark. If you see the red, that's the things that I hate in Perl. These circumfix dereferencing, where you've got to write your code left to right and then go back to the left to add the thing you forgot that you would need, and then go back to the right to add the thing to pair that. It's a drag. So get rid of all of these, and we're going to put them at the end. So that Q, that one's a circumfix, stick it at the end. That one, we're going to do that, stick that at the end. Any place in the code we want. How about this? We're mapping some input. Instead of circumfixing the result of that method call, we stick it at the end. Because in English, which Perl is more like than, I don't know what this would be, we read left to right. And how about that last remaining thing, the rarely used highest index thing? Yeah, sure, why not? Let's make that postfix too. You get postfix, and you get postfix, and you get postfix, everything. And it's not just for single dereferencing. Notice the glob. You can postfix dereference glob stuff. Great. Actually, it turns out to be really, really good, except that if you're doing glob stuff, you don't care because your life is hell. So is this thing. You can get all your slices can now be postfix dereferenced out. So any kind of slice you want, it doesn't matter how left to right you've gone, you just do it. And it works in strings. It's awesome. Okay, that's postfix dereferencing. Let's get back to the future. Reference aliasing. It's another more fun with references. So we've got an array. This is some remedial Perl with references here. We've got an array. It's got 4 things in it. And we take a reference to that array, $ref. And then we shift from the array that we get when we dereference ref. Okay? Then we say array. What is this going to print? I heard some right and some wrong. It's 2, 3, 4. Shift takes the left one, right? So those who said 1, 2, 3, you were right in spirit. So we get 2, 3, 4. But I don't like typing backslashes. They make me think there's something in my code I'm concerned about. So I stop. I'm just going to make a copy, and I shift the copy. What do I get when I say the array? 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, I made a copy. So how can I avoid this ref? It's not the backslash I don't like. Okay, it's not the backslash. It's the dereference. Dereferencing is ugly. How can I avoid that? Like this. More backslashes. Let's put a backslash on the left-hand side. So we're going to make this thing have the same reference with the thing on the right. Force those 2 things to have a referential identity. And then when we shift from alias, and notice here, that alias has no dereference. It's not a reference. It is an alias. They are both bound to the same variable, and they both affect the same thing. So probably you think, well, the only reason you'd use this is to be a complete evil jerk and have action at a distance happen. Well, that's one application. But let's say we've got some to-dos. Earlier today I said something like, oh, I like tea, and someone said, I thought you liked pie. And it's probably because all of my slideshows have me wanting to eat pie. So we've got a to-do, and it's an array of hash refs, and we're going to iterate over them. And then inside that for loop, what do? We get the item, and we say, please do this thing when. And the terrible, awful problem that I think is just terrible and awful is these stupid arrows, right? I don't want them because they're ugly. They're more syntax than I should need. But I need them because $item is a ref, and I need to dereference them. Well, if we, instead of making it a reference that we pull out, if we make a new hash that is an alias to the referenced value, just in this lexical scope, then we can drop those arrows. So this is a slightly more Perl 6-ish way, where we've got the looping over bind. Or it's what you get if you had no variable, and you were binding the topic to these. But it works for any data type. Yes? We've got sigil variants in Perl 5, so when we get a single item out of it, you have to switch the % to $1. Oh yeah, okay, it's a typo. Yeah, let it go. I use a pragma in my Perl that lets me use whatever variable I think I should be using. I'd release it on the CPAN, but I don't want to brag like Damian Conway about my code. I just allude to it in my slides. So we got this guy, all right, here's another one. We got this long, awful chain of things, then we're going to reference over that. So if we don't, in here, want to dereference it several times, we could just not use it in a for loop and start like this, and make our hash that gets some element deep out of there and stop dereferencing all the time. Now, if you're like me, you don't want to have that hash sitting around later in your code, so that you wrap the whole thing in a block, and then you might as well make it a for, because you're effectively topicalizing here. I'm really happy with this. My experience has been people look at this and they make a face kind of like the one Tom's making. They look a little sour, but after you use it for a while, it's pretty nice. Okay, that's reference aliasing. It's an experimental feature. You can turn it on with use experimental ref aliasing, but we might break it or rip it out. I don't know, but I think it's pretty cool. Okay, we've made Perl faster. Everyone likes faster. I'm just going to run through these kind of fast. One of them is, if you are splitting a string into an array, in many cases, what we used to do was split it into an array in memory and then copy it. Much more often now, we can do it directly into the array. So no copy in memory. Nice. Less memory, faster, it's great. Everybody wins. Lots and lots of stuff was done to improve method call speed, which is good because it's real slow. So when you make this call to new on my class, it's got to go look up the method, and then it caches it. But it's a runtime hit every time you're hitting a new method for the first time. What we've done now is basically, when we're compiling your code, we pre-populate the cache. Real cheap, makes things real fast. Universal gets a special case of this, or Super, they get special cased into going directly to the cache. They don't have to start doing weird resolving. And a lot of this is powered by a new op. If you are a terrible or crazy person and work with the op tree directly, which some people must do, you might start seeing this operator. Another operator you might start seeing is multi-deref. What is multi-deref? Well, let's say you have this line in your code. My condolences. And what happens when you run this code in Perl is first it says, right, I'm going to start with A, and then I'm going to look for the 0th element, and then entering that, and then the next thing, and this is all Perl, like checking the reference type, going down into it. It's lots and lots and lots of Perl work, all the way down to the end. With the multi-deref operator, it says all these things are very simple. I will find the reference and go right down there. All in C in one opcode, really, really fast. Great. Everything's faster. We're all happy. Okay, enough asterization. Let's talk about So, Perl does IEEE floats And mostly what you think that means is that sometimes when you add two numbers that you think you understand, you get an answer that you don't understand, unless you have a master's in computer science, in which case you're not writing Perl. But it also means you have support for infinity, negative infinity, and not a number, and possibly negative 0. That's a great one. Okay, so if you say, tell me about infinity, Perl says it's infinity. And how about what's infinity plus 0? That's infinity. And two infinities, well, that's still infinity, and so on. And sometimes you end up with not a number. Sometimes, right, you get just weird things with negative infinities I'm not showing here. Now, this is what you get on some platforms, and you think that all makes sense. And then sometimes you run the same code and you get this. What? And that's just because different platforms have different stringifications of these, and we used to just let the platform stuff leak through, there's no abstraction, which is terrible, because then whenever you write any code that might deal with this, and doing standard floating point stuff, for some value of standard, seems like it should work, this would confuse your test, and you'd have to start doing special cases. No, it's all fixed now, everything gets the same stringification. Another funny bit of this is, 0 plus Nan, you get Nan, that makes sense. How about 0 plus Nancy? Well, you get Nan. Well, the reason you get that, it's totally reasonable. It's totally reasonable. Yeah, okay, I can say that. Is because when you say 0 plus 1, 2, 3, ABC, you get 1, 2, 3. The first part of the string that looks like a number is what you get. But you also get something else. No? A warning. Yes, you get a warning. But no matter how crazy the thing is that you put in that starts with Nan, you get nothing. Well, we fixed that, right? If it's good for 1, 2, 3, ABC, it's good for Nancy. And now you're going to start getting these warnings. This bug does not affect you very often unless you're interacting with something called Nancy. Okay, so that's the not a number stuff. Let's talk about the not a number stuff. Specifically, this is not a number, and neither is this. Really, it's really not, right? Because you understand what this is, right? This is 1 plus 23 over 100. Oh, there's going to be a typo in a slide coming up. 1 plus 23 over 100 times 10 to the 4th, right? The different color bits all map together. I think we all understand how this scientific notation works. And this is scientific notation designed by some kind of alien race with too many fingers. And what happens is it's hex E plus A3 over, and that's the wrong number there, but over the right denominator, times 2 to the 4th. Okay, times 2 to the 4th. Instead of being like E and then a power of 10, which wouldn't make sense for pure bit math, for hex math, we have to use powers of 2. Someone asked me, why do we use P and not E and just understand? Because E is in hex, that's right. Okay, so this number, we would write this way. And if you want to get it back out and you want to print it in that format, what do you use for printf here? We'll use X, right? X is for hex stuff. You get a decimal number as hex. No, because X is for integers. But now we support %A, which I'm sure you've all been eagerly awaiting. And you notice that what you get out is not what you put into it, just like it might be if you use %G. It's putting it into the form that any computer would say, well, this is obviously the correct way to put it, you silly human. Okay. I will only say this. The good thing about having these literals is that you can be prepared to do exact floating point math that is not going to have weird rounding errors because you're not going to be expressing weird rounding errors. Okay, so speaking of numbers and not numbers, let's play a game. Is everybody ready to play? Name that operator, all right? And what is the type of the operands to this operator? Numbers, thank you. Next round. For people at home, they're just mumbling. It's great. Okay, and what are the types of these operands? Strings, these are strings. Okay, and this guy, whoa. No, never mind, moving on. And, or, XOR, XOR, I don't know. And the type for these? Booleans, okay, how about this? And, what is the type of the operand for these? We don't know, right? What? One of Perl's founding principles is that Perl 5 does not have a type system, and we bloody well don't want one. We've got operators, man. And the operators decide the type of things. You say the plus sign, you mean numbers, and we're going to use them like numbers. And you say this, we're going to do something, and you're going to like it. Well, if you give it two numbers, it's numeric. And if you give it two strings, it takes the strings, breaks them down into bit strings, and does it that way. But if you give it a number and a string, or a string and a number, it does something. And the most important thing in Perl is to do something. We've decided that if something was good, something else is even better. And we have added experimental bitwise feature. And what happens here is when you say this, it is numeric. And if you said Nancy and Susan, it's going to be Nan and 0, and I don't even know what the answer to that is. But it makes more sense. But if you give it a string and a number, it's going to treat them both like numbers, because that's what you've said. And if you want a string, the obvious operation is this. Because what everyone has wanted is more operators, right? And Overload supports this, of course. Merry Christmas, new operators. We also have these two, and these two, and wait for it, Tom knows what's coming. These two, right? And they all do just what you'd expect as long as we're talking about the numeric one. The problem with the string one is it's still kind of wonky on wide characters, because what does it mean to use smiling cat face with crying eyes as a bit string? I don't know. But we do know. Perl 5 establishes this pretty clearly. It means you use the internal memory representation of general UTF-8, and you issue a warning saying wide character used in string-like bitwise bit string thing. We're going to fix that. So, if you ever use these operators, they're not too common. Yeah, this guy, what does that mean? If you use these operators, which they're great operators, and I actually do use them, this is a feature you really, really want to use, at least for numeric ones. It will always make it do the right thing. The old behavior was totally crazy, and after this, there's only one more operator that does not store the type data in the operator, and I think it knows what's coming. Okay, this is another bit from 520. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We added stuff like this. So here's this piece of code, and it's terrible, terrible code, which should be shot or at least fixed to look like this. So, yes, we added this last year. It's real great. We use it all the time. This is like the simplest possible signature. If we wanted a default, we might write this. So if you just say add 4, you get 4, because y can default to 0. If you want to make it take 0, 1, or 2 operators, you can have add, just be 0. And if you want to skip that plus step, you can get a little crazier and say, well, if there's no second argument, just immediately return x without entering the body of the sub, because Perl is awesome. And you could do the same thing there. And these work because we can put pretty arbitrary expressions on our signatures, like this is probably what we'd really write in production. I'm pretty sure this works. I couldn't bring myself to test this because even I have limits. And it's not just scalars, right? We can have slurpy stuff. So here's a subroutine, and here we pull it up into the signature. This is good. We can do this. And what makes this even nicer is that if you tried passing in an odd number of arguments, it will notice that you put an odd number of things into a hash, and it will blow up. It will say, this is what you gave me cannot possibly be a hash. Go, get out. If you want a prototype, you can write this. And the big change in Perl 5.22 is that you write this. It used to look completely different in Perl 5.20, like that. That's just crazy. That's great. But this is important if you've been using this code, signatures in, for example, Catalyst, and you want to move this stuff around or start using it, you actually need to know about this. One more thing, so let's say we're going to look at this. We've got a subroutine, and it takes an object and an argument, which is a hash ref, and a queue of things to work on. We're going to go work through the queue, and for each item in it, dereferencing it as an array, we're going to debug out the item's name if the debugged argument is true, and then we're going to accept the item's job ID. So the first problem is really obvious, is that we didn't use a signature. So that's nice, that's one little bit of code fixed. The other is all these dereferences. And I don't like dereferences. Some people say the big advance in Perl 5 from 4 was references, and I'm going to fix their wagon. Well, one we can fix is like this, right, and pull out that item so we drop all those arrows. Another one is Q, right? We don't like that Q had to be dereferenced, and we don't like that arg is being dereferenced here. So how about that? That's pretty nice. What if we can alias these variables directly from the references that are passed in? Well, we can't. It doesn't work. This doesn't work. But maybe this is something to do in Perl 524. If somebody would like to work on that, Perl 5 Porters is an open list for subscription, and we love new people. Okay, so that is Perl 522. I think I have a couple more slides I can go to at the end of this. Let's do that right now. There's a slide chooser here in Keynote. Can I bring it up? No? Okay, let's do this. Okay, I'm going backwards through my slides. Okay, let's talk about warnings, because we've got 13 minutes. This is amazing. Okay, I don't think I've ever run short in my life. Okay, warnings. So right now you can say use warnings, and that's the same as saying use warnings all. Turn on all the warnings. Or you can say use warnings fatal, and that turns on all the fatal warnings. The problem is sometimes we want to add a new warning. Like, who can tell what's wrong with this code? Smiley face. Yeah, very good. There's a smiley face in there. I do not like smiley faces in my code unless they're emoji. Personally, I wanted this to be a strictures failure, but I'm not made of stone. So we want to add this new warning, and it turns out not everybody wants this new warning turned on. So the first thing we do is we have this massive mailing list thread talking about adding these smiley face warnings and how like they're really, really useful. No, they're terrible. They're going to break all my code. Well, this would be a useful warning if we had added it in Perl 5.003, but the ship has sailed, and we're just going to have to suck up those smiley faces. And these discussions happen almost every time there's a discussion about a new warning. And this is, you know, not a smiley feeling. We want to be able to have warnings that can only be implemented in Perl that you don't have to use if you turn on warnings, right? I will also say that a lot of the warnings people want to add we shouldn't be adding can be added in linters. Like sometimes people are just a little warning happy. Like there's ways to find problems with your code other than adding new warnings, but sometimes there aren't. So what do? Well, what if use warnings meant use the default warnings, and use fatal warnings was the default fatal warnings. And then when you said use warnings, you don't get a warning here because we don't make smiley warnings default. They're an extra warning available to be turned on explicitly. And if you say, well, I want the default warnings and the smiley warnings, then you get told that. Or if you say, I want all the warnings. But keep in mind, saying you want all the warnings is like, I want all the warnings you can ever think of ever forever. All of them. Do them all. It's like running your compiler in pedantic mode at runtime, right? But that's what everyone has been doing since, what, Perl 5.6. And that's why we can't add new warnings. This literally is why we can't have nice things, okay? And what if we do the same thing for strictures, right? Like, who has done this? We got something that polls for events, just listens for events, and it prints the event out to the log file. Super duper simple. And then, like, after you've been running this for a year, you say, okay, it's time for us to go out of those log files. We're going to check out how our business has been doing for a year. How's everything going? Oh. Well, it's nice, I guess, that you can stringify a reference. You know, it's useful when I'm debugging. But sometimes I don't mean to do that. And there's there's a pragma for turning this off, but it's kind of a crazy hack, and we don't want it to be. So what if we could add a stricture for this? Well, we can't turn it on by default, because some people really do reliably expect they can stringify references, even if they don't have stringification overloading. And that's okay, it's totally reasonable. Like, that's the expectation we've set for a long time now. But some people don't like that expectation, they want to fix it. What if we could say no strict stringification, and this would become a runtime error the first time? Well, we can't do it right now because use strict means turn on all the strictures. We can never add new strictures. If we change the idea of what it means to say just turn strictures on to turn on the ones that everyone agrees should be turned on, which I'll probably admit just means the ones that have been turned on forever and we can't add new ones to that group. We need to figure this out too. But it gives us the ability to have new strictures without the other proposal which comes up now and then on P5P, which is, well, we'll have use strict, but we'll also have use strict more. Later we'll add use strict extra. And I've also been thinking about use strict, I found some really good ideas. Okay, whoa. We fell right off the end of the array. Okay, now we're going to jump back in time. Perl 522 is available right now. It was released just over a week ago. And no bug reports at all. No, thanks. But actually, it has been a pretty good release. I was really cheered. KMX, who does the releases of Vanilla Perl, Strawberry Perl. I don't like fruity ice cream. Who does the releases of Strawberry Perl? Sent a mail to their mailing list, which is the Vanilla Perl mailing list, which is why I'm thinking this, saying that in the past they've recommended that people wait until the .1 release, but given the stability of the current and recent releases, just go ahead with .0, which is, it warmed my darkened heart. Okay, so it's available now. A higher version number than ever before, another feature I could have gotten into a little more. We have, it looks like 8 minutes. 8 minutes, unprecedented. I can take so many questions, so I hope there are some. Yes?
With the ref aliasing, why didn't we do my backslash app alias equals backslash app array? Why is the backslash before?
So the question is, why is the backslash before the my instead of before the sigil? Syntax nonsense. It's a question of how the parser is going to be able to made to dance. Can I remember a more specific information? No. But if we go and look at these threads, and you can bug me later and I'll dig them up, it had to be done this way. And yeah, it is a little weird, but yes?
Similar to this question, what if you want to do the alias into the variable that's already been declared?
What if you want to put the alias into, so you don't want to say my, right? You want to, okay, let's find out. This is something never seen before. I will be doing a live demo. But first I'm going to have to get my terminal onto the other screen. Oh, here we go. Let's find out. Okay. Okay. Are you ready? So let's see the program again. Here's our program. We're going to make it array ref, alias an existing variable to it, and then shift and say something. Someone said, don't we want to say X? Let's do both. Anybody else? Yes, Nick.
When will I have an operator to do string bitwise logic on post point values?
So one of the other rooms, I think they're talking about Perl 6 right now. And so the question was, when will there be an operator to do string bitwise logic on Unicode code point values? No, I really think you won't. I think you're likely going to have to use map. Maybe bit vector could help in some way. You're just trying to help me kill these 8 minutes, aren't you? Yeah, no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think it's needed. I mean, what you do in Perl 6 is you'd have some way of like of operating, mapping your operation across the graphemes and zipping them together, and you could use something like that in Perl 5. It'd be a little clunkier, but the thing is, you wouldn't use it, right? If anybody in this room is going to be doing it, it's you, and you're saying you're not going to use it. It's okay. Here's what we're going to do. Are you ready? You can have that feature when you write it. Thank you. Okay. Any, anybody else? Moving on. Bueller. See, I don't know if there's anything else I want to talk about. Anything else anybody wants me to mention? Yes? So the reason you want to do, so when you talk about bitwise operators on strings, it's important to remember that Perl is a flawed and terrible language. And specifically what I mean is we have one type, the string, that is used for both character strings and byte strings. And if you have a set of bytes, here's an example, in fact. I took an online course on cryptography, and it was a lot of fun. And the homework assignments included things like, here's some very flawed ciphers, break them. And you end up with like input strings that you're reading from a file, and they're bytes, and you think you know the key. And how does like really bad crypto work? Well, you have two strings and you XOR them together. Well, if you've read in a string of bytes from a file, and you've got a string of bytes that is the key, and you can XOR them all, you're matching values, that's really useful. So it's useful because you think of strings here as strings of bytes, or more usefully, strings of bits, without having to use like bit : : vector, or God forbid, unpack or vec. So that's really useful. But using it for strings of text is kind of weird. Anyone else? Yes, way in the back. Oh, over here. Wait, I'm being redirected around. Carl. Oh, yeah. Oh, Carl, thank you. Yeah, so this is almost apropos of nothing. One of the reasons that Perl is so stable release to release is that there's a lot of testing done on every change we make. There are people who have computers running that smoke CPAN constantly. They just reinstall everything on almost every commit of Perl and then tell you what broke. And that means we get bug reports as if from an automated system that say, this commit broke these 3 modules, and here are links to the failure reports from their test suite. And I say as if by automated system because they are done by human beings and almost entirely by Andreas Koenig, who runs PAWS and who runs analytics.cpantesters.org. He is a treasure, and with the rest of the tester system is largely responsible for us not breaking CPAN all the time. So thank you, Andreas. I don't imagine you're watching this. Sometime, if you're a CPAN author and you get an email from Andreas or from the CPAN testers or from the automated PAWS daemon, just reply and tell them that he's great. Okay, someone else. Peter.
Yes, last I checked, there are some new platforms supported again in 5.6.
Oh, that's yes. These are the people reminding me of things I said I had to cut. So yes, we've added a new platform support, or perhaps restored platform support, and everyone is going to be thrilled. We are finally building again on ZOS, IBM ZOS, which ran on the AS360. What do we run that on? Well, it runs on mainframes. It's for MVS systems. And the thing that makes it magical and special is that it is not an ASCII-based system. It is EBCDIC-based. So Perl, again, supports EBCDIC. I believe the only of the big P languages to have ever supported EBCDIC and to support it now and have a tester running. Rocket Software runs a tester that runs regular smoke tests against new builds of Perl, which is, it's crazy. Yeah, do you want to clap for that, I think? What was that? And all the tests pass. All the tests? Do they all pass now?
Yes.
There's one more hand. Yes?
What are the forecasts for the removal of experimental on any features that are currently experimental, one way or the other?
So the question is, something like this. Are we ever going to remove stuff that's experimental?
Or
Or promote them, I see, okay, or promote them. I believe that 524 will have an example of both promoting an experimental feature to stable and of removing an experimental feature from the system. Some of those discussions are going on the list now. There's multiple features under discussion. I think the system works. The experimental system, which was added so that we would no longer have features that were experimental but used by everyone and had been experimental for 12 years. We're trying to make using an experimental feature a little more obnoxious, just a little more, so you have to really notice that you're using it, and so that eventually we can say, you know what, this didn't work out, or this worked out, but we don't think we actually need it, things like that. So I think we'll see the policy executed in both directions in the next few months. We're on date again. How are we doing? Oh my, I've gone over. Unbelievable. Any final question? No? Okay, thank you very much, and enjoy 522.